Hi everyone, Rick Russell here. Stand by for channel markers. On the morning of 17 December 1944, Admiral William F. Halsey's mighty Third Fleet, which included 13 carriers, 8 battleships, and some 65 cruisers and destroyers, was joined by a logistics group that included 12 oilers. Refueling began immediately. After 3 days of airstrikes against Luzon, many ships were dangerously low on fuel, and heavy seas were mounting. By midday, refueling had become hazardous. Hoses and lines parted, including flagship New Jersey's own lines to the nearly empty Fletcher-class destroyer Spence. Several near collisions occurred. Halsey rescheduled fueling. But to refuel, most of the ships had emptied their seawater ballast. Whether from time constraints or fearing contamination, some were reluctant to add seawater back into their fuel tanks. On board the flagship, at 1414, a weather disturbance was reported some 450 miles north-northwest. One refueling plan after another was set and canceled. The Admiral's last change of course, about an hour before midnight, took the fleet headlong into a compact but extremely powerful typhoon 180 miles northeast of Samar. In USS Dewey, a Farragut-class destroyer serving with a logistics group as flagship of Destroyer Squadron 1, Captain Preston Mercer, the squadron commander, and Lieutenant Commander Ray Calhoun, the CO, had seen mountainous seas before, but the 60-foot waves that began to overtake the formation were something different altogether. At 0500, men were thrown from their bunks. Soon, and for more than an hour, the radio crackled with "Man overboard" reports from the fleet. To appreciate what was about to happen, you might rewatch the typhoon scenes in the Caine Mutiny. Although Hollywood could not recreate how much worse Dewey's typhoon was compared to the fictional DMS Caine's, their experiences as ships struggling to survive are similar. As Dewey's morning wore on, driving rain and spray caused repeated short circuits, which wreaked havoc with communications and electrical power. Standing upright on the bridge was impossible, and the helmsman exhausted himself trying to use the wheel as his personal anchor and at the same time spin it rapidly to steer.
Holding her, sir. The wheel feels loose.
Every 40-degree roll to starboard caused the ship to lose lube oil suction in one shaft or the other, at which point the engineers would ring up stop, then 1/3. But as the roll to starboard became worse and the roll to port significantly decreased, Calhoun kept the starboard shaft at stop except for the occasional turns needed to keep it from warping. The howling wind drowned out all other noise. Visibility was nearly zero, and at about 1000, Dewey scarcely steered clear of the stop carrier Monterey. A fire had started when aircraft had broken loose and crashed on the carrier's hangar deck. The carrier was wallowing in the storm and secreting smoke when Dewey, already struggling with steering control, passed close under her stern. Mercer calmly advised that Calhoun take on salt water, despite being at 75% fuel capacity, and Calhoun agreed. By 10:15, Dewey had lost all contact with the fleet. The rolls to starboard were also getting worse. Barely would the ship slowly return to upright, then she would snap into a hard roll to starboard. She was now routinely listing 60 degrees. The book said a Farragut-class destroyer could recover from a 70-degree roll, but so much new armament and radar equipment had been added since the last incline test that Calhoun couldn't be certain what roll might be his ship's last. Below decks, the ship's crew were doing a lot of pumping, bailing, and praying. Each roll, and for the record, the worst was 75 degrees, the forced draft blower intakes on deck sucked 500 to 1,000 gallons of water into the ship. The men would lose their footing and hold on the overhead, falling violently onto the starboard bulkhead and into shoulder-deep water, often to have a pump or other machinery break their fall. It was no better on the bridge, and in fact much worse than depicted in the Caine Mutiny, as the rolls held the deck nearly vertical for a minute at a time. Calhoun sensed Dewey couldn't last much longer. He considered cutting off the mast, but changed his mind when he envisioned its radar falling and punching a hole into the forward fire room. Then, to his utter amazement, the terrible force of the storm, Providence, he said, began jettisoning topside weight for him. First to go were the ready ammunition lockers. Next, the storm wrenched the depth charges and their launchers from the deck. Then the forward stack came down. As it fell, it knocked the whaleboat and a davit off the ship. The reduced sail increased stability immediately. By 1300, the wind had reached no less than 125 knots and was likely much higher. But an hour later, the barometric pressure had begun to rise and the wind decreased. They continued to fight the storm, but the ship was riding much better, and everyone began to believe they would live. But 3 ships didn't survive. Spence and 2 of Dewey's sister ships, Hull and Monaghan, stalwart veterans of the attack on Pearl Harbor and the tough fighting afterward, had capsized with heavy loss of life. It took 3 days to rescue Monaghan's 6 survivors. 790 men died in Typhoon Cobra, as it came to be called. The Navy's court of inquiry began at Ulithi Atoll on the day after Christmas. That's all for this channel marker. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment or recommend another subject below. As always, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.